So that's a good question. I think that's I've both my current campaigns have had an ongoing antagonist. I think that the idea that I like the most that I want to try in the future is to, rather than sort of picking, because if you're going to have a long running antagonist, you as the DM have to sort of decide. You have to sort of pick that and plan for that. And I think instead of doing that, the next time I run a campaign, I want there to be, rather than sort of one big bad. Yeah, pretty much both times, Gibson. It's just been me in bad guy form. Imagine, rather than one big bad guy, more like a sinister six, like maybe not exactly six, but like a handful of smaller antagonists that can each have their own quirks and unique things. And the nice part about doing that is that the campaign and the player's reaction can sort of tell you who they hate the most, because that's who you really want to be like the campaign representative. So maybe there's an inventor that's sicking clockwork contraptions on people. Maybe there's a vampire. Maybe there's somebody, there's some sort of awful wizard. Maybe there's some sort of king or a politician. And they face all of these different smaller antagonists in arcs. And then turns out they really, really hate that king or that politician, let's say, but they got rid of him, defeated him, no problem. Well, he's back in some other form and has been, pulling the strings since level 6 or something like that, or level 10, or however it works out. I think that could be a lot more satisfying, because then the players can sort of indicate who's the interesting villain, rather than us. It's a lot of pressure on a dungeon master, I think, to set out and say, here's going to be who you guys find interesting and compelling. We're at level 1, and as a DM, you don't even know the characters yet, and the characters don't know the world, and the players don't understand. Nobody has any idea of anything yet. How on earth could we pick that soon? So that's what I'm excited to try the next time I run a game. Yeah, exactly. When it fits, I found that it fits a little bit better with my style of running the game, where I use milestone leveling, and I've tried a little bit of um, experience point leveling, and I think I just prefer milestone for various reasons. And part of how I try to level up the threat is that, if they're level 4 and they're going into level 5, maybe it's 5 sessions between level 4 and level 5. Well, that means that threat, whatever they're facing, whatever that arc of the adventure is going to be, if it's from 4 to 5, I think it would be 4 sessions. Like, you play the number of sessions that your level is approximately. So if it's 4 sessions, okay, well, that's not going to be an in and out. That's got to be something a little bit more complex. Maybe there's, an initial threat, and then there's a something that seems to resolve it, but then there's an extra challenge, and they work that out, and then they can destroy whatever the threat is at the end. Maybe it's a 4 session thing, or just a long dungeon, or a long-ish dungeon, medium-sized dungeon. But once you get up to like level 14, and they're playing, 10 or more weeks of an arc, like, that has to be a much more complex situation. And so that lends itself to lots of different types of villains and different types of situations. Goal is that whoever the players engage with the most. I'm not sure that I necessarily want my players to hate. It could be fun, right? That antagonism being baked in is fun. The back and forth and the needling, and that tends to pop up sometimes with parties, and that could be fun. It could be fun to have, that animosity grow. I think my goal, though, generally is that I want the players to, and the characters, and therefore the players, to be able to understand what it is that the villain is after, and understand it, understand that whatever the motivation is. Like, I want it to be a real character that's really trying to do something that they are now in the middle of and meddling with for some reason. yeah, I can't help myself but try to make the villain, you know, the more time that I spend with villains, the more reasonable I like to try to make their aims. Because I think the more level-headed they feel, I mean, they have to be wrong, right? In some form or another. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for them to be villainous. You know, it's not good to be a villain, but they think they're the hero. And I think that's what I want to establish each time, is that the party is like, well, you know, even if it's like, well, listen, we respect you, but you're wrong and somebody has to stop you. Like that's more interesting than, you know, I think there's a reason that mustache twirling villains get a bad name, you know, and it's because that idea is kind of old fashioned. Sometimes it's fun and sometimes it works and it's just what you need. But I think over a long period of time, you know, people crave a deeper story with an interesting villain. Heck, look at, you know, TV shows over the past decade. Really popular ones have been arguably about the villain. There's just been compelling villain stories that have been more interesting than, they're effectively like tainted hero stories, right? They could have been heroes, but, you know, because of mistakes or because of ego or some issue, you know, central to that character, they couldn't be, and they became the villain instead. Please wait. Breaking Bad's a great example. House of Cards, Better Call Saul, which is connected to the Breaking Bad universe. Wayden making a bad guy fight another bad guy. Yeah, some I've run encounters before. Not specifically like bad guy versus bad guy, even though dynamics can happen that way. But you know, like the party comes in and, you know, comes into a scene where it's two maybe antagonistic forces that are fighting, and they can choose to help one or help neither, or just watch and pop popcorn or however they want to go about it. But I think to have characters in a world, villain or otherwise, it should be possible for them to go up against each other. Possible for villains to be in opposition to each other, for sure.